Everyone, Mallory here for our final Instagram live of the season. So excited for our guest. Let me get him added on here. Let's see. Oh, I think it worked. Wonderful. Hey, Justin.
Hey Mallory, how are
I'm
you?
good. How are you?
I'm awesome, thanks.
Wonderful. Well, let me just introduce you to everybody. So, everyone, this is Justin Manning, the vegan financial advisor. Justin's actually based out in BC, so thanks for waking up for us this morning and being ready to go. And he is a licensed insurance broker whose mission is to integrate ethical, vegan friendly principles into financial advising. And yes, we will dive into what that actually means in a little bit. He wants to make sure his clients' financial plans align with their values for a sustainable, prosperous future, which I think is a really interesting angle to take. So, thank you so much for being here, Justin.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. So, first things first. So, the title that you have on Instagram and on your website is that you're a vegan financial advisor. And when I was mentioning to some people on my team that you were coming on as a guest, they were like, "What does that mean?" And I said, "I don't know. That's what we're going to talk about." And I'm really excited. So, for our audience, are you able to kind of tell us what does veganism have to do with financial planning?
Yeah, thank you. I get the question a lot,
Yeah.
and it all stemmed back in 2016 when I first got licensed, and I didn't have that brand identity. And there was an event that happened. We were learning about something called critical illness insurance,
Hmm.
and which the top three claims, almost 80% of them are from cancer, heart attack, and stroke.
Okay.
And the session stopped for lunch, and they brought in double meat lovers pizza, chicken wings, donuts, cookies, Pepsi. And I looked around the room and I thought to myself, this is wild. So at that moment, I was in this new environment as a financial advisor. And at that moment, I had already been 6 years vegan myself.
Okay.
And so I had like a pretty clear epiphany within my first week of, okay, well, from a brand identity standpoint, I'm going to marry these things together because I think that there's a place in the market to speak to those type of people, whether they're
Hmm.
vegan or not. There's a lot of people listening who are interested in the
Yeah.
environment, health, animals. So
That's really smart. I mean, I think it's interesting when people are able to personalize what they do, right? There's lots of insurance brokers out there. There's lots of people who are providing financial advice. So what makes someone stand out? What makes them impactful? And as you said, I mean, choose how you want to eat and how you want to fuel your body. But thinking about the environment and thinking about sustainability, that's something that I think is on everybody's minds or should be if it's not. So the fact that you figured out a way to tie that in, yes, for your brand, but also to benefit your clients. I think that's a really cool angle to take.
thank you so much.
Yeah. So, what does it mean to take an ethics-based approach to financial strategy? And like, how do you implement that with the clients that you work with?
First and foremost, you might people listening might have heard that before in the financial space. And first and foremost, it really means being ethical to your
Okay.
clients, and so acting in their best interest. So that's like the sort of the paramount first point, which is hopefully sort of table stakes across the industry when people are having conversations with folks. Unfortunately, it's not oftentimes, but so
Mhm.
ethics-based approach is making sure that you're taking the best interest of the client first and foremost above yourself and anything else. And then that kind of spins off into the conversation around ethics, which everybody has their own, I guess, line
Mhm.
or viewpoint and position of that. For myself and a lot of people that I speak to on a daily basis, it's how are we being ethical towards the environment? How are we being ethical towards animals? How are we being ethical towards our own health?
Mhm.
And what decisions can we make to align ourselves with those values?
Mhm. Nice. That sounds really great. So, for life insurance, this is something that some folks a lot of times overlook when they think about planning for their family's financial future. I think a lot of times people don't think of insurance as being like an investment opportunity, right? I think people have a very limited view of what insurance can be. So, why do you think that life insurance is really important, regardless of someone's age? Why do we want to have life insurance?
It's very similar to the same thought process that folks go through when the conversation about their will comes
Mhm.
up. Um, when you talk about financial planning and you think of it like building a house, you don't build a house unless you have a solid foundation
Hmm.
first. Everybody knows that. And so in financial planning, the financial planning house, the foundation is your will and your insurance. And so, there's a lot of psychology behind it, why people don't want to have those conversations. And it makes sense. We don't roll out of bed and wake up and think about our own mortality. Life would be pretty bleak and stressful, more than it already is if we did that. So, that being said, though, oftentimes, doing the hard things, having the hard conversations, those are the things and the conversations that really, really matter and have a long lasting impact. And so ultimately, life insurance for the select population where they want it more than they need it because they've amassed such amount of wealth and they're looking to really have tax efficient liquidity strategies.
Hmm.
For the majority of people, it really is a need. And it's ultimately, if I were no longer here, are there people that I care about or charities, which if we want to touch on that,
Hmm.
if I was no longer here, are there people that I care about who would be financially impacted negatively?
Right.
And for most people,
Right.
that answer is yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I mean, on our channel, a lot of people are millennials and Gen X, and they have houses and they have really big mortgages, and they need to think about what happens in that case. In my personal situation, my husband and I had insurance before we bought our house, and then we bought it. And then our financial advisor sat us down and said, in no way do I want to be rude to Mallory, but Andrew needs more insurance. And I said, well, why not me? And she goes, with all due respect, he makes more. And if he dies, we've got a big problem on our hands here because you cannot hold this mortgage on your own. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we should probably value that, right? In our case, we actually ended up doing both. But like at the time when we were trying to figure out budgeting, I was like, okay, I mean, as much as a woman, that was a little insulting. I mean, it's just the fact of life. If he died, I'd have to sell my house and be out of here. But now, if he dies, knock on wood, I don't technically have to. I might choose to, but it's different. And I think that's something is a lot of times people, I think there's this old world view that life insurance is to pay for your funeral. And I think for our generation, especially with real estate being, I don't know what it's like in BC, but out here it's just comical how expensive it is just to get like a nice little 3 bedroom house in the suburbs. It's ridiculous. And I think that life insurance is a way to guarantee that you're not in the worst moment in your life having to just uproot your family from your house if one of the contributing, partners in the household dies. But then there's obviously so many other ways that life insurance can be beneficial. I'm wondering if you can talk about grandparents or parents who buy life insurance on children and grandchildren and how that can be an investment opportunity. Are you able to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. So, that being said, life insurance is one slice of the sort of the trifold brochure, if you would, of insurance when it comes to financial planning. You have your life insurance, disability insurance, critical illness insurance. But
Hmm.
for the purposes of life insurance, yes, there's, what most people need and can afford, which is affordable term life insurance. And then there's
Hmm.
permanent life insurance, which is what you're describing. And that
Yeah.
might be whole life insurance or universal
Hmm.
life insurance. I will say, caveat for those listening, there might be people listening who have been pitched this type of insurance before as a young adult or a young parent. I will say that it's oversold, it's overpresented, it's overpitched, for the majority of people who do come across it and end up buying it.
Hmm.
But to answer your question about grandparents, yeah, it's a great way. Obviously, they may be already helping the parents, with the kids'
Hmm.
RESPs. But it's a great gift. It can be a great gift for a parent or a grandparent to insure the child. And it's often when you or the grandchild, when the conversation comes up, parents are usually kind of initially kind of taken aback, almost. Well, why would I talk about the death of my child?
Yeah.
And that's not the purpose
No.
of it. To your point, it's they're the most insurable that they're ever going
Yep.
to be, which is the piece
Yeah.
to insurance is
Mm.
insurability, right? And so
Mm.
parents and grandparents, yeah, you can buy the policy on the child and think of it like owning a house in the
Mhm.
sense that
Mhm.
the insurance policy builds up value inside of it that can be used at a later time, whether that's for school, to start a business, to go on a trip before they go to college, whatever it
Mhm.
might be. and then they can eventually gift it to the child so they have that insurance essentially for their entire life.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's great. As you said, I've definitely seen as well that it's really being sold like a lot. And everyone seems to be advertising about it. And so that's why it's important to be working with someone who understands if it's right for you and your family, as opposed to just some other product to buy, like we're being sold all the time, right? Now, I know we have a lot of stay-at-home parents, in particular stay-at-home moms on our channel. And I always get lots of questions from them about like, if they don't earn income, although they obviously contribute to their household, if they do not earn income, they'll ask certain questions like, why do I need this or why do I need that if I am not the income earner in my household? So why would a stay-at-home parent want to have life insurance? Like if we just used my family as an example, right? We were talking about insuring my husband more than me because of the income that he makes. So why would a stay-at-home parent, what is the value of them having life insurance?
So in this scenario, do you have children?
I do, yes.
Yeah, okay. So uh, I had this conversation last week with a stay-at-home parent. It might be a stay-at-home mom, might be a stay-at-home dad. The fact is, that's a job.
Yeah.
Everybody who's in that position and hears that is like, oh, thank you. I feel seen because it
Right.
absolutely is a job from the sense of
Hmm.
you're a cook, you're a chauffeur, you're a bookkeeper, you're a
You're a
cleaner. Like there's,
scheduler. You're like an
oh,
administrative assistant. That's my job most
exactly.
days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're the CEO of the household, right? Like
Yeah.
essentially, right? And
Hmm.
so, or the COO of the household, I should say,
Yes.
right? So,
Yeah.
that carries the duties, which carry a cost. And so
Hmm.
it's very simple when you break it down and you say, it, again, back to if that stay-at-home parent was no longer around, God forbid,
Hmm. Yeah.
are are there loved ones that are going to be negatively financially impacted?
Hmm.
And
Right.
that answer is yes. It's just try and simplify it as much as possible. And it's very, very common for, to your point, to be kind of the old guard of thinking of, well, only the breadwinner needs to be
Yeah.
insured.
Hmm.
But that's doing a massive disservice to, what would be kind of quantified as the human life value of that
Hmm.
stay-at-home parent. Because
Exactly. You know, sorry, go ahead.
childcare is, you talked about real estate prices being madly expensive. Childcare is madly expensive.
Yeah.
And that's just one component of being that COO of the household. And so, yeah, there's
Hmm.
there's value attached to that, and it's important. And also, I've had a lot of stay-at-home parents think that they cannot get insurance, think that they are
Oh,
uninsurable because they're not working, which some
oh,
people might not ask that question or bring it up because they don't
interesting.
want to feel silly, but
Right.
that comes up too, and that's not true.
Hmm. Wow. That's that's surprising that someone would think that. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's your life you're insuring, not the financial value of your life that you're insuring, right? So that's interesting that people have that and that might be a barrier to them learning more about it. Um, So let's say that someone's watching who has no insurance of any kind. I know you kind of talked about, I forget what term you used, but sort of like the trifecta of like main insurances being disability, critical illness, and life insurance. Let's imagine that someone has nothing, right? They're like, you know what? Okay, yeah, I hear you. It's probably time that I start doing that. Is there, I'm sure it's different for every person in every situation, and I do get that. But on average, what do you think is the most, not necessarily most important, but the best strategic option when choosing an insurance? If I have enough money to pay for one insurance policy, what's the one that you think people should be going for?
Mm.
Yeah, I know.
If
It's
it,
hard to
it,
pick.
it if that individual
Hmm.
has loved ones that would be negatively financially impacted if they were no longer here, I would say term life insurance.
Okay.
If the budget allows for it, it's very important to have disability insurance as well because
Hmm.
I'll give you a statistic. A 40-year-old female who doesn't smoke before they turn 65 has about a 4% chance of dying before 65, but closer to a 40% chance of having a disability before they're
Wow.
65.
That's
So
a lot bigger.
it is.
Yeah.
That being said, loss of life is although the probability is low,
Mhm.
the impact is catastrophic,
Right.
right? So
Right.
I would say if you have people who rely on you and would be financially impacted if you were no longer here, I'd say term life insurance.
Mhm.
For those listening that may be solo entrepreneurs, they don't have a family, they don't have children, anything like that, I would say protecting your income if you are
Mhm.
still around is your
Right.
biggest priority, and that's
Right.
disability insurance.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That does. Um, Justin, if people want to find you and chat with you further and learn more about your vegan financial advisor way of looking at life, how can they be in contact with you?
Here on Instagram,
Hmm.
at Justin Manning V, my website, justinmanning.com. Super easy to find. I try and make myself as accessible as possible to people. I find that that's one of the biggest barriers for folks is when
Hmm.
they have questions. It's like I call the 1-800 number, I
Yeah.
can't get a hold of somebody, or they might feel intimidated. And it's like, listen, before I got into financial services, I knew nothing about this industry. I
Mm.
had no insurance. I had no estate planning. I drove my credit score into the ground because it wasn't taught to me. And then I
Right.
was able to rebuild it back to
Hmm.
excellent before getting into this industry. So like I can understand where people are at.
Yeah, of course. I mean, ignorance is not a bad thing unless you know you're ignorant and you're not doing something about it. So if you're watching this and you're like, you know what, I don't understand half of the things that they're talking about, well, then go and learn about the half of things you don't understand, and then make very informed decisions about what you're going to do to step forward. So thank you so much, Justin. You're the last guest of our season, and I really appreciate you reaching out. I always see you watching our IG lives as well, and I really appreciate that you do that. And you've been such a big supporter, and I'm glad we could have you on as a guest finally.
Thank you so much, Mallory, and appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.